Former President Trump heads to Florida today ahead of his arraignment on federal charges tomorrow. The latest CBS News polling, though, shows he's still the frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. At an event this weekend, Trump called the charges against him, quote, ridiculous.
Many of Trump's GOP rivals weighed in on the historic indictment over the weekend, including his nearest challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Look, when I was in Congress, I remember, Hillary had the emails with the classified. And my view was, well, gee, as a naval officer, if I would have taken classified to my apartment, I would have been court-martialed in a New York minute. And yet they seem to not care about that. And is there a different standard for a Democrat Secretary of State versus a former Republican president? I think there needs to be one standard of justice in this country. Let's enforce it on everybody and make sure we all know the rules. You can't have one faction of society weaponizing the power of the state against factions that it doesn't like. And that's what we've seen.
CBS News political director Fin Gómez is in Washington following this for us. Fin, good morning. How are other GOP candidates reacting to the president's indictment?
Good morning, Vlad and Anne-Marie. For the most part, they are echoing what Ron DeSantis just said there. You have seen it from Vivek Ramaswamy. You've seen it from some of the other contenders, including Tim Scott and his former vice president, Mike Pence, who have essentially have been aligned with the collective Republican groupthink, if you will, that this is a political intrusion, a political action by the Biden administration, and they are also citing Hillary Clinton in the 2016 situation there with her emails. You're hearing the same; they're almost like talking points. For the most part, you are hearing also some criticism. At that same, over the weekend as well, Asa Hutchinson, the former Arkansas governor, came out criticizing Donald Trump. He had said in a statement earlier that he should step down from his campaign, should end his campaign. Also, Christie, the former New Jersey governor, has been critical of him. Interestingly enough, someone who is not running, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, said on Face the Nation on Sunday that this is a serious and significant situation, and more of those Republican leaders in the field, on the Hill, and really throughout the political landscape should come out more vociferously criticizing Donald Trump in this situation. We'll see if that happens, but right now, for the most part, they are circling the wagons around the former president in this case.
Well, to that point, former Vice President Mike Pence also addressed the indictment over the weekend. Here's what he had to say.
And I'm deeply troubled to see this indictment move forward. Its capacity to further divide our country at a time when the American people are struggling as never before, and at a time when the world is becoming almost more dangerous by the hour.
So, like the other candidates, he's chosen to sort of ignore the accusations and the seriousness of the case here. Is he right in saying that voters are not that, or suggesting that voters are not as interested in Trump's legal woes as they are in other issues?
He did say, Mike Pence also did say previously that no one was above the law. So he's going a little bit more towards that channel, if you will, of criticism towards his former running mate. However, he does have a point, at least according to our recent CBS News polling that came out just yesterday that shows that not only has Trump's support not moved, it's actually increased. It's gotten bigger. He's become much more of a formidable candidate. He is the early front runner. But per our CBS News polling, it shows that that it doesn't change the view of Trump. You see the poll up on the screen now. 61% say that it won't change their perspective of Trump, how they see him. Also, it's more one of the biggest points that I saw that really stood out to me in this poll was that a whopping 76% of likely Republican primary voters say that the indictment was politically motivated. So that's why, in part, that you do see some of these Republican rivals to Donald Trump not hitting Trump on this, because politically it's something that they have to align themselves with the Republican base that, as you see, has overwhelmingly, at least according to our new CBS News poll, has essentially supported the president. If you recall, Anne-Marie, after the Mar-a-Lago search, really which really started this whole process, there was a boost that the former president received from that experience, from that situation. You saw that then, and you're seeing it now, where the Republican base is again rallying around President Trump. And the thing is, I think the point that was being made by some of these Republican rivals in their campaigns to me and others at CBS News privately is that they don't know how sustainable that is. There are some looming investigations. You're looking at the other Jack Smith special counsel case, but also in Fulton County, Georgia. He is going to be looking at multiple investigations. Will those be a hurdle for him getting to the nomination? Some other rivals believe it is. So far in our polling, it does not seem to be the case.
Yeah, because what's clear, Fin and Anne-Marie, is that over the course of many, many years, going back even before Hillary Clinton and the issues, the controversy over her server, politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, have politicized nearly every investigation that the Department of Justice or the Federal Bureau of Investigation undertakes. And that's true of both parties. And so the irony is that as you watch Senator Marco Rubio appear on our air this morning on CBS Mornings, suggests, as Mike Pence has, that this will have an adverse effect on the electorate, it's because those politicians will then go on other networks and talk about how corrupt the Justice Department is, how corrupt the Attorney General is, right?
How politically motivated this was.
It's not the electorate that says this is an illegitimate investigation. It's the politicians who say to their supporters that it's illegitimate, which is then parroted by those folks who are making the decisions on voting day. So let's talk about this interview that Christie did on CNN, and he said the details of the indictment against the former president are, quote, devastating. Christie has a town hall tonight. You've heard the same thing from Bill Barr. Because Christie is a man alone in the wilderness, calling it for what it is, Fin. So he perhaps sees a lane. Is there a lane for him to go after the former president and actually convince people?
There is a lane, and he's pretty much solely the only one in it. You can argue that Asa Hutchinson also is trying to get into that lane or be in that lane, but he has been the most vocal critic, as you know, Vlad and Anne-Marie. And the expectation for tonight, he's going to go after Trump. He's going to go after Trump for, the aftermath of this indictment. He is known as a hammer out of New Jersey, both rhetorically and his political style. So that is the expectation. That's what I've been told by Republican operatives close to the Christie camp. Is there a lane? How big is that lane? And where can that lane go is the question. Where's the trajectory of this lane for him? And he's really putting all his marbles in essentially one basket, the basket of the Granite State of New Hampshire. However, but outside of that, can he get somewhere past that? Can he get somewhere with this? If he gets to the debate stage, he does have some hurdles there. But if he gets to the debate stage, Republican sources have told me that is his hope politically, because he's going to hit him. He's going to hit him for this. But so far, you've seen it, in the results of our CBS News polling. The Republican base is strongly, pro-Trump in this situation. So, he still does not have. According to the polling, according to people that I've spoken to, really doesn't have a very clear path, if you will, to the nomination. He has a very, very uphill battle, somewhat of a Mount Everest battle. You're seeing 61% of likely Republican primary voters would vote for Donald Trump today. That was the question in our CBS News poll. So, how does he get around that? Perhaps with being the only real vocal critic of Donald Trump on the campaign trail. We'll see.
We'll see how it works, indeed. Fin Gómez, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.